This video will be concerning, and maybe be a part two or whatever, to any video I've done on ignition sources, survival, standards, and planned obsolescence as a meme, conspiracy theory, fact, or mere assumption. We're going to be covering Bic, Clipper, and Zippo lighters, and their history partially, and, well, okay, we're going to invoke the Phobos cartel, which was a real conspiracy, but had an actual good reason to exist, if you want to be generous and realism-based. Here we go. 1973, Bic Corporation Company, named after the way to pronounce the last name of the person who founded it, put out their first adjustable flame, full-size butane pocket lighter. As a necessity, it could be dialed up or down based on the gas depletion rate, temperature, excessive or too low, and it had a 1-hour burn time as a standard, or 3,600 ignitions if you could do it in 1 second. Depending on how hot or cold, you had to turn up the flow rate, but you could still do it in a second. It could sit 30 years in storage if you left it in packaging especially. But now they last less long. Well, no. Let's move on. The flame height should not exceed 120 millimeters if it was adjustables, and it should be under 50 millimeters if it was fixed. Out of necessity, the way it was made in the 1970s, it was given an adjustment because butane pocket lighters in general could be purchased, but had variable flow rates based on, quote, gas pressure. Butane brought to a certain pressure level will be a liquid. You can shake it, look inside of it. A lot of them included the ability to look through them. Some had it as a window, some had it as the entire shape, or it was semi-translucent or transparent, semi-transparent as in translucent, to detect it. 1987, Bic switched to, or fully switched to, their constant flow rate, porous membrane, mass-producible flame regulator that did not have to have adjustment changed. However, like a lot of you, I don't like the height being the wrong height. I want it shorter, believe it or not. So it'll hold a flame really close to it to be even more windproof than it already is down in that little metal chimney area, to light really small amounts of material. I'm not lighting a cigarette, which requires the height that you're looking at, or a pipe, a wood, old style pipe for tobacco, or even today, ganja, simply because I don't need it for those purposes. Now, in the past, they'd have a continuous rotation wheel, and then eventually it just had a lever shape on it for the adjustments. Now, what did this help with? It was cheaper, fewer parts. It was made in such a way that it didn't need to be adjusted at all. Yes, you can look up a video on how to adjust them. Please don't. It lowered complexity. It made it easier to standardize and make it really precision-based down to the last 1 part in 1,000 to make it a specific type. If you wanted to get a lighter from the company for a tobacco pipe, it would have a longer flame on it maybe. They even made ones that had different shapes for specific purposes. It was just better to specialize them that way. It reduced cost. It increased the reliability, dropping the failure rate. Also, it reduced safety incidents because the flame would be too high on a hot day and too low on a cold day where you get in there too closely and end up running it for way too long and melting it and pop and produce a safety issue, burn your eyebrows. And also reduced or eliminated user tampering. I'm one of many people who tampered with this. I have a little one right here, the mini one, which holds exactly half the time on it, by the way. I would manipulate them as well to, again, make them less flow. And wanted to do that as well, but realized it's not worth the risk, and I wouldn't really be improving it because, again, with the reduced complexity, they have an even longer shelf life. With me, it's shelf life. I'm not lighting a cigarette every day or using it to light anything on a regular basis. And, yes, I looked through my backup collection of them and found one of them with an adjustment, and it was a mini Bic, which I didn't realize any of them could be. It might have been an off-brand or a fake. And another one that didn't have an adjustment. It was a mini Bic just like this one, and I weighed them. And I was able to get light strong enough to go through them to see that they had the same level. one 10 years ago has the same amount of fluid as the one now. And yes, people have done YouTube videos where they get them new in box for the 1970s, 1980s, 1990s, and more recent ones, and found out, no, they haven't really changed the amount of ignition material or whatever. And all of them used the same 4,000 ignition spark wheel, including the one that, if it's a small one, it's a 30-minute 1800 ignition, which means you'd end up with a flint out of it. I did a video previously about where I would take apart quote-unquote dead Bic lighters and convert them into ignition sources only, just using that ignition source. This was an ultralight hack that I used to do, and I used to make them and sell them to people. I'd sell them for $1 each, even though I found them for free, because I'd have to sit there and sandpaper the bodies apart. That was the only way to do it without damaging them and cracking them and weakening them, to make these little ignition sparkers that were a 1/4 inch across and a couple inches long, and you could use them to ignite an alcohol stove. And I'd have to make sure that I made it obvious which side to ignite from by making them slightly lopsided, because people would put them on the wrong side and get them kind of jammed. This was a lighter created by, or designed by, or whatever you want to call it, Marcel Bich, spelled B-I-C-H, which obviously meant in the United States is going to eliminate the H and call it Bic, because that's how it's pronounced. 12-minute continuous burn time. And then it explodes, because that's not what it's for. That's maximum. That's compared to a 1972 produced Clipper lighter that had a removable, maybe sometimes not, ignition device you could put in and replace. These were refillable versions of the Bic lighter. They were also at one time adjustable flame and then switched over to continuous, exactly what you need kind of thing. And you can still buy variable flame length, variable consumption rate, with instructions, by the way, lighters just like this. I like the Clipper better because it's designed to be refillable. Bics should not be refilled, even though it'd be nice if they could be. It made them more complexity, more expensive, and Bic came out with a refillable one, and it bombed. Nobody wanted it. You could even replace the flints and everything just like the Clipper. But people liked that a Bic lighter was stupid simple. And the Clipper may or may not have as long a shelf life. These are 1972 and 1973 produced lighters. Direct comparison, right? Well, the Clipper's better if you want to be able to refill it and have a more sustainable, not throw it in the garbage, disposable. And again, Bic lighter came out with one that wasn't, throw away in the garbage, and it bombed or it didn't. Well, let's move on. Now let's talk about the ultimate one. Chrome-plated brass Zippos. 37 minutes continuous burn time, but they might desolder. That's an important point. They light only 200 times instead of 1,800 times to 3,600 times, effectively being 10 times as bad as a literal seeming throwaway lighter that can last 30 years. Bic lighters, nice from the 1970s, but the Zippo that we all know about came out in the 1940s and 1930s. And, well, yeah, the major change for the one you now know, with a refill pad you could lift, that was the way it was done instead of doing the other method they had before that, was 1943. It actually came out 1932, and it's over 500 million have been sold in the 90 some odd years since then. And you could put in a folded 4-inch wick, a slightly dismantled spring-loaded flint inserter, and you could put in a pack of flints. So it was extremely high ability to maintain it. Many people do it as a ritual every month to make sure the damn thing's reliable. And I got paid by people at one time or another to make them gas tight. The original ones were made out of a piece of brass tubing. They would put it on a mandrel and stamp in the pattern that would eventually be folded in after squashing it into a tube shape, and then fold in for holding a chimney shape in the middle, a holder for the flint wheel, and a holder at the other end for the little cam and arm to make the lid open up. And then another complementary piece of tubing that was literally made to where it would fit over the tubing was squashed into the shape to make the body of it, the outside parts that you actually use. And because it was done that way with such tight tolerances, the original Zippos were nearly but not quite gas tight. They had to be soldered. There was a soldered plate that went in. Sometimes it was pseudo-brazed in place or soldered with a specific mix of metal. And that was the only defect in them. If you left them going long enough, they would provide light. I mean, they were like having a little lamp with you all the time. But they would only run for about a half hour on a fueling, which was fine. You didn't use it that long normally. And they could be gas tight enough, the original ones, to hold fuel, which was basically a variation in gasoline in most cases, for a month without refill if you didn't use it very often. And this was, 1930s through 1940s, and then today. Mostly for people lighting cigarettes and tobacco pipes. But it was a basic need that was fulfilled by having them. Naphtha and or other materials, distillates, would be used for fuel. And it was designed to last forever, and the company has had this belligerent policy of repairing everyone that's fed to them or giving a brand new one if they have to. They won't give you a period correct one from the 1930s or 40s, but they'll repair it if they can, because the reputation is that the damn thing won't die. There are incidents of people, legit incidents that are recorded and confirmed at least a couple of times to have happened or be able to happen, bullets being stopped by the damn things. Low-powered ones, but pistol bullets nonetheless. So what did I carry in my kit? I carried a trench lighter made out of brass bullet material at one point, based on ripping apart a dead Zippo to get the same screw-in thing, and used it for igniting a wick, and then the cap of it was the rest of another bullet going over it. It was made out of one bullet casing, another casing inside of it with a neck down forming the pathway for everything, and then another cap over it. I owned one for a while. I've also owned a Forever match, which is a variation on a similar idea, and hundreds of other variations. And I also carried, dead ass, a Bic. And the Bic I had, the last time I did a refill kit for anybody, I gave my old kit to somebody who needed it more and then ended up needing to make one for me. My last time I bought these it's at least 20 years ago. These things last for a decade. They're Zippos. Wannabe. Reliable. But Bics work. Clippers are better, but I never ever used them after a point because the ones I could get were not serviceable. And the little Bic ones are just so easy to get. And I effectively carried a micro version of a Zippo where I didn't squash the tubing down. I just used the full tubing. If you're not aware of it, doing that with the same tubing would end up with a, basically 3/4 inch or a half-inch pipe diameter hunk of brass that would be your lighter. Those were also sold at the time. Making it flattened out would fit in the pocket better. That's why it was done. So what's this video about? Was there some sort of planned obsolescence or sabotaging of these lighters at any time to make it to where you had to buy more, or they were less reliable, or they would hold less fuel, or those damned safety Nazis making it to where you can't have good things? The reason they aren't variable anymore is the original reason they were variable output only for the Bic. Most of the clippers were never, but the only reason they were done that way is because the temperature change, pressure change, and fuel levels would change, and you had to have it. But once they got rid of those problems, they didn't need to, and now it's set to too high for me and too low for some of you. One size doesn't fit all. And yes, I'd like to have an adjustable flame one, but I also realize it's not that relevant if the things are like 50 cents a pop if you buy them in a box. And yes, I do miss having a Zippo or my own self-created rip-off version of it that I didn't realize accidentally, being a trench lighter, I'd done a good job making a duplicate of. And no, there isn't some conspiracy involved in any of it. It's all BS. It's just them trying to make it more reliable and more consistent and making it cheaper so more people can have them. Again, it was a disposable lighter. And as for the clipper, yes, it's the non-disposable version of the same thing, but most people throw them away anyway, as evidenced by the ones I find on the floor, on the ground all the time. And as for the Zippo, even though it doesn't have as many lights, yeah, it's still a better product, and I'm not going to change my mind. Thanks for watching. Have a good day. Good luck with that.